so much more tight to hemoglobin than does oxygen. Just pushes it right out of the way. And we have this leftward shift of the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. All of us constantly remember it, but I'm going to do is kind of give you a little reminder what that's about in a moment. And all sorts of other things happen. The mitochondria are disrupted, myoglobin's affected, peroxidation. We're not going to worry about it, but just one of those things like when you hear the word peroxidation, you just know that's going to be bad. And it is. It adds to other problems that happen along the way. So let's remind ourselves about the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve and why a leftward shift is such a bad thing. Now remember, it all starts with PO2 on the x-axis. And when you do a ABG, the oxyhemoglobin saturation on the ABG is not directly measured. It's based off this curve. And it's based off the PO2. It actually measures that. And so here's a standard curve that can happen. And so just for example, let's say I had a PO2 that was 50, which correlated with a hemoglobin level of oxygen and just over 80%. So what's the impact if I were to do a leftward shift? Let's understand where the impact is. So for a PO2 of 50, if there's a leftward shift, instead of having about 81% saturation, I'm actually more close to 90% saturation. That might sound good because, boy, it sounds like I got more oxygen being carried. No, it's not good because what it means is it's holding on to that oxygen. The hemoglobin will not release the oxygen, so it's holding on to more of that oxygen, less oxygen being released downstream, and now everything downstream gets hypoxic. So this is why the leftward shift is bad, because it basically means oxygen cannot come off the hemoglobin. And that has a huge impact because oxygen is in our blood in two different places, bound to hemoglobin, which we just talked about, and it's also dissolved in the plasma. But the amount in plasma is about that much. The amount in the hemoglobin is that much. And so when you mess with the hemoglobin, you are really messing with downstream oxygen. All right, clinically what happens? Everything that you would expect if you don't have enough oxygen. And the number one organ in our body that is not happy when there's lack of oxygen, the brain. The first item to be impacted. So then you start getting all sorts of weird, the things that make you look like you have the flu. You got a headache, you got nausea, you're dizzy, you don't feel good. Pretty simple, very nonspecific. And unfortunately, if things persist and get worse, well, now we have the issue of the delayed neurologic sequelae. It's delayed, shows up later on down the road, clearly happens. The exact details as to who it's going to happen to versus not, that's not as completely clear. And we're going to talk about where HBO may or may not have a role in that. Special considerations. The poor pregnant folks who are exposed to carbon monoxide. And the situation is clearly there's a worse outcome for the babies. And this may be related to some of the different physiologic things that we see, including that fetal hemoglobin binds the carboxyhemoglobin to a greater extent than even what happens to mom's hemoglobin. So the fetus rate actually has an increased sign. Infants, they can have this little infants. What we're going to do with that person. A classic table here that we all grew up with in terms of how long does carbon monoxide hang around in the half-life based upon room air versus oxygen versus hyperbaric oxygen. No question, if there is any issue whatsoever about CO possibly being present, those folks should be on high-flow oxygen. Give them as much oxygen as you can get on board. Then we move into the debate of, do you move on to hyperbaric oxygen? And that's what we're going to be getting into here in a moment. All right. So here are the absolute reasons that everybody agrees we should do, well, maybe we kind of sort of, I don't know. A lot of debate on this. Now, what you do note on that list of the ones that the most likely indications, a lot of this is, once again, brain-related stuff. It makes sense. Went back to what we talked about already. The brain is the item that takes the big hit. And then we have issues that pertain to levels. What's the right level in which you would dive? Well, open to debate, because there certainly are no clear studies at 20 compared to those who are not. Challenges are, how many people are all Presbyterian, and you put them in the back of an ambulance? Certainly can happen with the pressures, and the biggest hang-up that happens for us. And actually, one of the few studies that have interesting on what to do or not to do. Cochrane Collaborative, a very large operational organization, trying to come up with evidence-based recommendations. Have been around for a long time and a lot of great work. What the Cochrane Collaborative will do is, if they really feel that when the folks write these articles, if there really is evidence in support of X over Y, they're going to come out and say X is superior. But commonly, there's just not enough data for them to come out with a strong statement. And that's the situation for hyperbaric therapy. Basically, they came out and said in 2011 that overall, we just don't have enough data to say that this is really of efficacy. So, what you going to do? Well, that's for you and your centers to decide in terms of your center policies as to who you're going to recommend. But be aware is that there certainly continues to be a lot of controversy over the role of hyperbaric oxygen. Kind of a fun table. A couple things, nothing to do with what's in the hemoglobin. Remember, hemoglobin might have a 30% level. It's fairly close to play with. Decontamination if needed, whether you do hyperbaric therapy. All right. The salts, lots of items in our homes. Cyanide is a part of it. That part's very clear with no argument. But dread, someone taking cyanide, okay. I don't think this worked out real well. This, right after the verdict, he took the cyanide tablet. You know, history can be everything. I remember in blue because as he brought him into, he had been suicide salts or and in terms of levels, well, you can get later on. Now, or do you, let's say 6.8, 6.9, things that will do it. Like hydrogen sulfide, as nitrites in that. But the sodium thiosulfate was the same, and it had quite a flurry as it hit the market. And I know the manufacturers were hoping it was going to show up the market pretty quickly. And Steve certainly did some great work on this item in the past. Well, there were lots of worries about terrorism, and it takes long in terms. It's a pretty safe medicine to use. Easier and safer to use. Maybe. So it gets down to a lot of EMS agencies will have more hydrogen sulfide. You're smelling this. Work on something. Next thing you know, now Ralph's of high concentration sulfide. Seeing that diagram. That unique aspect of an irritant and caustic injuries separate. All right, begin to smell it. Not a whole lot. Pulmonary edema, kind of interesting one, is really what we see here at the bottom. Nervous system. Once again, electron transport chain dead in the bottom of that hole. There it is. But look at the side now, getting rid of it. In this setting, this is a consideration of making methemoglobin. Ever have a hydrogen sulfide patient yet? Now, interesting, just to share, is a strong acid plus something that has a confined setting. You can use acid sources. Our car was the classic one. Of hydrogen sulfide gas, suicide patient. An issue they have, and mild versus moderate versus a really bad exposure to hydrofluoric. And I'll tell you, this is common. Low concentrated stuff, small exposure, commonly to the hands. Common's probably too strong a word, but it's not uncommon.